Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be with the Vice Premier of China, a very highly respected man in China, and we're negotiating trade and the trade agreement, and we have many representatives from China, and as you know, and most of you know who they are, many representatives from the United States. I think we're getting along very well. Ultimately, I think the biggest decisions and some even smaller decisions will be made by President Xi and myself. And we expect to have a meeting sometime in the not too distant future. And I can only say talks are going along well, but we're going to have to see what happens. I think there'll be some points that this group won't agree on because maybe they're not supposed to agree on them, allowed to agree on them. And I think President Xi and I will work out the final points, perhaps, and perhaps not. So I just want to say, Mr. Vice Premier, it's a great honor to have you, and we thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would you like to say something?
Okay. Thank you very, very much, Mr. President. It's a great honor to meet you. I came here. First, I bring the message from our president. If you don't mind, I ask our interpreter to read the letter to you.
Thank you. Please. So you can hear fine. You'll speak for them, too.
Okay. Message from President Xi Jinping to President Donald J. Trump. Mr. President, as China and the U.S. are holding another round of high-level economic and trade talks, I entrust Vice Premier Liu He to be my special envoy and ask him to bring you my warm greetings and best regards. Not long ago, you sent to me a special letter of festive greetings, together with a lovely video made for me and my wife by your grandchildren on the Chinese Lunar New Year. We enjoyed the performance greatly and were happy to see that the little ones have kept improving in their Chinese. We watched the video more than once and feel that we must hit a like for these adorable grandchildren of yours. I'm also pleased to note that to follow through on what has been agreed upon between the two of us in Argentina, our economic teams have, since lately, engaged in intensive consultations and made significant progress. This has been well received in both our countries and the wider international community. It is my hope that our two sides will continue to work together in a spirit of mutual respect and win-win cooperation, and could redouble our efforts so as to meet each other halfway and reach an agreement that works for our mutual benefit. Mr. President, I stand ready to be in close touch with you through various means. Please let me know if you have any specific thought in mind. To conclude, my wife Peng Liyuan and I wish to extend our season's greetings to you, Melania, and your family. May you all enjoy happiness and success in the year of the pig.
Thank you very much. That's very nice. Say thank you very much. I would really appreciate it if you would just give my warmest regards. The video he's talking about is a video made by Ivanka and Jared, and it's their children speak fluent Chinese, even though they're very young. They were taught at a very young age Chinese. And when President Xi met Arabella, who's the oldest, he said this was like perfect Chinese from at the time it was 5-year-old, from a 5-year-old girl from Beijing. And I thought that was nice. And they actually made a little video that they sent to President Xi. And if you want, we could even give, I'm sure the press wouldn't like to see the video, but if you would, just in case you would, I think it would be fine. If you'd like to do that, Jared, you could just give it to a few of the people. But I thought it was a very nice thing. And it shows a great friendship between the two countries. And that was really just a Happy New Year wish that was given in Chinese by Arabella, mostly by Arabella and her two brothers. So I think it was, I think it's cute. I wouldn't mind if you gave it. We're having very good talks. There's a chance that something very exciting could happen. This is a deal that would be signed by me. I've been in touch with Congress. I've been telling many of the people in Congress exactly where we are. We're right now getting a 25% tariff on $50 billion worth of goods coming in, mostly technology and high technology. We're getting a 10% tariff on $200 billion worth of goods. The 10% goes up as of March 1st. It goes to a 25% number. So we'd be getting 25% on 250 billion, and there's about 267 billion that's untariffed, untouched, which we discuss later. But if we can make a deal, we wouldn't have to bother with that discussion. So we'll see what happens. But we've had very good talks. As you know, Mr. Lighthizer has done a great job, but it's only a great job, Bob, if you get it finished, right?
Yes, sir.
And if it's a deal that's a good deal for both. And Steve, great, but it's only great if you get it done. Wilbur, Sonny doesn't care. He just wants a lot of products being bought from the farmers. Is that right, Sonny? That's what you care about. Sonny's more interested in the farmers than he is any other aspect. But Larry Kudlow, Mr. Ambassador, the longest serving governor in the history of the country, as you know, and now he's the ambassador to China. But he was the governor of Iowa 24 years, right?
20, well, I would have been, except you appointed me as ambassador.
I took you, but you were still the longest.
22 years and 4 months.
It's the longest serving governor in the history of our country, I believe, as I remember
right.
from the time.
That's right.
And you've done a great job as governor, and you're doing a great job as the ambassador to China. And I might tell the story that when the ambassador was a young man from Iowa, he was in China. And he was dealing with people from China, both in Iowa and in China. And he met a man who was a young man, and he is now the head of China, President Xi. And he said to his wife, he came home, and this was how many years ago, Mr. Ambassador?
Well, 1985 is when he came to Iowa.
Right, but you met him in 1978 or so, right?
I went to China in 84, and then he was.
So he met him, and he came home and he told his wife, I just met the next president of China. And they say, how would you know? He said, because the competence of this man is so enormous that I believe he's going to be the next president of China. And years go by, and he became the next president of China. And they like each other. So when it came time to picking an ambassador from China, I say, I think I have the right guy. He happens to be governor of the great state of Iowa, and you have done a fantastic job. But I thought that story was incredible. So many years ago, he said that he knows who the next president of China is going to be. I just think it's a great story. And his wife confirms it fully, so that's good. So I just want to thank everybody for being here. We're going to have discussions right now. We're talking. And again, I think we're making a lot of progress. I think there's a very, very good chance that a deal could be made. We'll be meeting at some point with President Xi, assuming we go further along the line. Bob, could you say a couple of words to that as to the potential of a meeting, whether or not we will?
We've made progress on some very important structural issues and some progress on purchases. We have a few very, very big hurdles that we still have to face. But if we continue to make progress, that would be a great outcome. And I think the Vice Premier agrees with that.
We do made great progress.
Made great progress. I think we have made great progress. Steve Mnuchin, what would you say?
I would just add the Vice Premier and his team have agreed to extend their trip for 2 days, so we will be meeting all day tomorrow and into Sunday. So we can continue on. Very important, this is the ambassador has done a very good job at documenting multiple MOUs that will be binding and enforceable and cover all different types of industries. If we can successfully conclude this will be very good for U.S. business and finally allowing China to open up to U.S. business.
Why do you bother putting it in a form of a letter of intent or whatever you want to call it? To me, it's a waste of time.
Well, we want to make sure these are very important issues. There's hundreds of issues that we're dealing with. Everything from financial services to currency to forced technology transfer to aircrafts to express shipping to different industries. So these are very complicated issues that
Currency
the ambassador
manipulation,
negotiated.
very important subject, which a lot of people didn't even think
Intellectual
of.
property right protection.
Yes, and that's one of the areas, Mr. President, we've actually concluded and reached an agreement, one of the strongest agreements ever on currency. But we have a lot of work to do over the next 2
Have you
days.
discussed
on
and
many
reached a
issues.
final agreement on currency?
We have on currency, but we have a lot more work to do
stabilize
over the next
currency.
2 days.
Okay. Wilbur Ross?
No, I'm very encouraged by what's going on. I think that the tariff situation is an important one, but this could be a good substitute for it if we can fill in all the blanks. But there's a lot more to be done, as everybody has said. So it's a little early for champagne.
No, I agree with that. Secretary, go ahead for the farmers. Sonny?
Really, I think the work that's being done on both sides is very, very important, and I'm happy to hear the progress, obviously. I think everybody understands, Mr. President, that this deal will be consummated if there is a deal by you and President Xi, and we understand that. Obviously, you have some great negotiators on your side, as does the Vice Premier in that regard. There are a lot of details to work through, but ultimately you and President Xi are going to have to really do the deal.
I think we're doing very well with regard to farmers and the buying of products from our farmers at a certain point. They've already made a big commitment to do that, but this will be a very, very substantial farm deal. This will be the biggest farm deal ever made, if you think about it. I don't think anything would be close because it's China. So hopefully if we arrive at a deal, they'll be buying lots of every form of farm product. Mr. Ambassador, would you say something if you'd like?
Well, I think this is probably a very historic time, and these are the two biggest economies in the world, and if these difficult structural issues can get worked out, I think it will be tremendously beneficial, not only to China and the United States, but to the whole world economy. So I know people have been working very hard. We've had many, many sessions, both in Beijing and here, and I appreciate the hard work and the diligence that's going on.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's going very well. Peter, would you like to say something? This is a gentleman that loves tariffs, by the way. He's like me. He and I loves tariffs. But Peter, go ahead.
I agree with you, sir. Tariffs are simple and they're enforceable.
Right, okay. That's all you have to say, right? But it's true.
I wish the team luck.
Good. They're doing a good job. Larry?
I'll just echo, and a good deal that is enforceable. That's so important to the United States and to you. But if you get a good deal and we can reduce these barriers, I think it will be good for growth and prosperity for the U.S. and for China.
I think the relationship has been very good. That's what I will say, more than anything else. As to whether we make a deal or not, who knows, but I think we have a good chance. But I think the relationship is outstanding. I think the relationship that we have now with China is better than it's ever been. And that's being, making a big statement. Our relationship, the president's relationship with me, President Xi's relationship with me, I think that it's the strongest it's ever been. One of the things that's so important to me is the fentanyl. And President Xi has agreed to criminalize the sale of fentanyl. Right now it's not a criminal product because I guess they call it industrial or they call it something, but it's not a criminal product. And China has much tougher laws than we do in this country on drugs. And they don't have a big drug problem in China. They have a thing called the death penalty. And China has much tougher laws than we do, but they've agreed to criminalize the sale of fentanyl, including the sale of fentanyl to the United States. And that is a tremendous thing because, as you know, most of it, if not all of it, comes from China. That would be a tremendous thing in terms of our war on drugs. So I very much appreciate that. And that's another thing we'll be finalizing, hopefully, at the meeting that we have. So subject to where they are, we're going to have a meeting now, but subject to where they are, we will be having at least an additional meeting, and then ultimately we'll have a meeting with myself and President Xi to discuss the final terms and things that haven't been agreed to, but I think a lot of those things have been agreed to, but they want he and I to agree to them in a final form. But the fentanyl is so important to us. The criminalization of fentanyl is so important to us, and we appreciate that. I want to just thank everybody for being with us. Mr. Vice Premier, I want to thank you very much. Their trip is being extended, as Steve said. Their trip is being extended by 2 days unexpectedly because they are making great progress, so they'll be here for an extra couple of days. So what would that include? That would be Sunday, Monday, or?
It'll be all day Saturday and all day Sunday.
All day Sunday, so they'll be leaving on Sunday night and Monday morning. So great progress being made. Let's see what happens. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Mr. President, do you expect to extend the deadline because of the progress here, or will you still stick with March 1st?
Well, I set the deadline of March 1st, and right now it's at 10%. And I think that and you can tell this to President Xi, I think that if I see progress being made, substantial progress being made, it would not be inappropriate to extend that deadline. Keep it at 10% instead of raising it to 25%, and I would be inclined to doing that. I haven't even spoken to my people about it. Most people assume it'll just kick in automatically to 25%, but I'm the one that said it, and I think it was a reasonable period of time. But we're covering things that we didn't even know we'd be covering. We're going very deep into the trade and covering items that a lot of people wanted to cover and nobody thought we'd ever get to. But we have a one-time shot at making a great deal for both countries. And so we are going to give it. So it depends on where we are. If we're doing well, Jeff, if we're doing very well on the negotiation, I could see extending that. And I don't think it would have to be a long-term extension, because I would imagine that if it took, Steve, another month or so or less.
Yeah, I think our expectation is to conclude this quickly, and if we get to the point over the next few days of making progress, recommending a meeting for you and President Xi in March.
So dependent on how they do over the next few days, I would certainly consider that. Okay?
Is drawing down U.S. troops a consideration?
Say it.
Is drawing down U.S. troops a
I
consideration?
don't understand.
Is drawing down U.S. troops a consideration in your upcoming summit with North Korean Kim Jong-un? And
No, it's not. No, that is not a consideration. That is not one of the things on the table.
what is on the table?
Oh, you really want me to discuss that now? Everything is on the table.
Mr. President, do you have any concerns about the Labor Secretary's handling of the Jeffrey Epstein case?
I really don't know too much about it. I know he's done a great job as Labor Secretary, and that seems like a long time ago, but I know he's been a fantastic Labor Secretary. That's all I can really tell you about it. That's all I know about it.
What about the charges against Bob Kraft? He's a friend of yours.
Well, it's very sad. I was very surprised to see it. He's proclaimed his innocence totally, but I'm very surprised to see it.
Have you spoken with Bill Barr about the release of the Mueller report? Have you spoken
No, I have
about
not.
that? You've
No,
said nothing to him
I
about
have
it?
not.
Do you expect to?
At some point, I guess I'll be talking about it, but you know the nice part? There was no collusion, there was no obstruction, there was no anything, so that's the nice part. There was no phone calls, no nothing. We have I won a race. You know why I won the race? Because I was a better candidate than she was, and had nothing to do with Russia. And everybody knows it's a hoax. It's one of the greatest hoaxes ever perpetrated on this country. So I look forward to seeing the report. If it's an honest report, it will say that. If it's not an honest report, it won't. Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. President, you've been at this, and your teams have been at this trade deal for a long time.
Yeah, well,
It seems
not
like
a
it's
long time when you consider it's probably the biggest deal ever made.
It seems like it's getting close to the finish line. At this point, when you boil it all down, do you believe it's more likely that a deal does happen or a deal doesn't happen?
Well, I think I can speak for the United States. The question is an interesting one. Is it more likely that a deal happens or doesn't happen? Speaking for the United States, I would say it's probably more likely that a deal does happen. But that doesn't mean it's going to happen. Speaking for China, if you'd like to answer that question, you can. But I would say that it's more likely that a deal will happen. The fact that they're staying, and this is a very high delegation. This is a man who is revered all throughout China as the vice premier. So the fact that they're willing to stay for quite a bit longer period, doubling up the time, that means something. I think there's a good chance that it happens. Go ahead. Would you like to answer that question? Wait. Would you like to answer that question?
Thank you, Mr. President. May I speak Chinese?
Yes. Please speak Chinese and you'll speak
She will
louder.
have
Okay.
Take it.
I will.
就是从中国来说呢，首先呢，我们认为发生的可能性是非常之大的啊，我们非常希望双方成效。
So, from China, we believe it is that.
You have to speak louder. I'm sorry.
From China, we believe that it is very likely that it will happen, and we hope that ultimately we'll have a deal.
中方愿意尽最大的努力。
And the Chinese side is ready to make our uttermost effort.
I think we both feel that way. I think we both feel that there's a very good chance that the deal will happen.
Mr. President, on troops in Syria, why are you reversing course?
I'm not reversing course. I have done something that nobody else has been able to do. In another short period of time, like hours, you'll be hearing hours and days, you'll be hearing about the caliphate. It's 100% defeated. Nobody's been able to say that. That doesn't mean there aren't some very bad people walking around and strapping on bombs and all of these things, but we've done a job that nobody else has been able to do. I heard Lindsey Graham this morning congratulating me on having defeated the caliphate, and frankly, I'm getting a lot of congratulations. At the same time, we can leave a small force along with others in the force, whether it's NATO troops or whoever it might be, so that it doesn't start up again. And I'm okay. It's a very small, tiny fraction of the people we have. And a lot of people like that idea, and I'm open to ideas. But the 2,500 people that we've had there will be going to different parts of the world. They may be going over to Iraq, where we have a very powerful base, a base that cost billions of dollars to build, frankly, and that we'll be using. But we have had tremendous success in defeating the caliphate. And now everybody's admitting, I did more in the last 3 or 4 weeks than people have done in years. And it's been very successful. But we want to make sure it stays that way. Yes, please.
Tech transfers, going back to the trade deal, we've heard that you haven't made a whole lot of progress on the tech transfers.
You want to talk about the transfer?
Does that still have to be part
Yeah,
of the
I'll let
deal?
Bob answer that. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, the answer is yes. It's one of the structural issues. It has to be done properly, and we made a lot of progress in it. So whoever told you we weren't just didn't know what they were talking about.
Mr. President, why haven't you condemned the North Carolina election fraud? This is a big story. The Republican candidate is calling for a new election. Why have you not condemned that, given you condemned other kinds of fraud?
Well, I condemn any election fraud. And when I look at what's happened in California with the votes, when I look at what happened, as you know, there was just a case where they found 1 million fraudulent votes. When I look at what's happened in Texas, excuse me, when I look at what's happened in Texas, when I look at that catastrophe that took place in Florida, where the Republican candidates kept getting less and less and less and less. Unfortunately, Rick Scott and Ron ended up winning their election, but it was disgraceful what happened there. So I look at a lot of different places all over the country. I condemn any voter fraud of any kind, whether it's Democrat or Republican. But when you look at some of the things that happened in California in particular, when you look at what's happened in Texas with all of those votes that they recently found were not exactly properly done, I condemn all of it, and that includes North Carolina. If anything, you know, I guess they're going to be doing a final report, but I'd like to see the final report. But any form of election fraud, I condemn.
Mr. President, when do you want to have that meeting with President Xi, and do you expect to have that in Mar-a-Lago?
Probably at Mar-a-Lago, probably fairly soon, during the month of March. Bob, do you have a date? Steve, do you have a date?
We're planning it with your schedule, Mr.
Okay,
President.
so we have 2 schedules, and we'll be planning that with the schedule.
Do you have any concerns about Michael Cohen's testimony before Congress this week?
Mr. President, are you still considering a
Lawyer-client, but you know, he's taking his own chances.
Where do you think stand with Huawei and ZTE? Would you still consider a ban of
Well,
Chinese
ZTE
technology?
paid a big fine of $1.2 billion, which nobody's ever even heard of before. And we want everybody to compete. And I guess it'll be somewhat of a subject that we're talking about here, Bob. We'll be talking about it. We may or may not include that in this deal.
What?
Would you drop criminal
The
charges?
Huawei and ZTE.
Would you drop criminal charges against Huawei as part of this deal?
We're going to be discussing all of that during the course of the next couple of weeks, and we'll be talking to the U.S. attorneys, we'll be talking to the Attorney General, but we'll be making that decision. Right now, it's not something that we're discussing.
Do you think that the congressional Republicans will stick with you on the on your emergency declaration and vote against?
Oh, I
the
think they'll
war
stick, yeah. Everybody knows we need border security, we need a wall. I think it's a very bad subject for the Democrats. We need a wall. We've apprehended more people than we have in many, many years. Apprehended, meaning we've gotten, with a wall, we wouldn't even have to apprehend them if we had the proper structure. It's costing us a lot of money with the military. We have a lot of military there. We have tremendous border control and border security there. We have, I'll tell you what, the people of border security, people of ICE, the law enforcement, generally speaking, have done an incredible job at the border. We have caravans heading up, and we're able to head out the caravans. We've done a great job. But if we had the wall, it would be much easier. And frankly, it would be a job that would be perfecto, and it would cost actually, ultimately, a lot less money.
So you don't think
Okay.
that
Mr.
you
President,
don't have a
one
resolution?
Thank
Mr. President, don't have a resolution?
What?
I have a question from China Daily. You
China
tweeted
Daily.
yesterday that the U.S. will not block out the currently more advanced technology in terms of 5G, 6G. What do you mean?
Well, I'd like to have all companies be able to compete. I don't want to artificially block people out based on excuses or based on security. I don't want to have a security
Including
problem.
Huawei?
Wait, I'm talking about everybody, really, including, but I'm talking about everybody.
Yeah.
I don't want to use artificial blocking. We want to have great 5G. Ultimately, that's going to morph into 6G. And probably 6G will be obsolete in about 2 months, the way it's going, you know, the way that whole world moves. But 6G at some point in the future will be obsolete. But I want to have competition with China, fair competition. I don't want to block out anybody if we can help it. Now, if there's going to be a security reason or something, then we have no choice. But that is one of the things we'll be discussing today. We want to have open competition. We've always done very well in open competition. Go ahead.
Mr. President, your officials mentioned that there was a deal on currency. Can you explain to us what that
Well,
was?
we'll let you know at the appropriate time. But we have a deal on currency and currency manipulation, yes.
Will you definitively veto that resolution that was introduced today that would block your national emergency if it passes?
On the wall?
Yes.
Will I veto it? 100%. 100%. And I don't think it survives a veto. We have too many smart people that want border security, so I can't imagine it could survive a veto, but I will veto it, yes.
Mr. President, last year you had blocked all U.S. assistance to Pakistan because of terrorists coming from there.
No, I stopped paying Pakistan the $1.3 billion that we were paying them. In the meantime, we may set up some meetings with Pakistan. Pakistan was taking very strong advantage of the United States under other presidents, and we were paying Pakistan $1.3 billion a year. I ended that payment to Pakistan because they weren't helping us in a way that they should have. And honestly, we've developed a much better relationship with Pakistan over the last short period of time than we had. But I ended the payment. We were paying Pakistan $1.3 billion a year. I ended that about 9 months ago. A lot of people don't know that, but I ended it 9 months ago.
But there is still stuff coming from Pakistan attacking in Afghanistan and India. U.S. forces in Afghanistan and Indian forces.
But what are you talking about? What are you trying to refer to? You have to speak up, I can't.
Yeah, the terrorists coming from Pakistan have attacked Indian forces in Kashmir.
That's right. No, it's a terrible thing going on right now between Pakistan and India is a very, very bad situation, and it's a very dangerous situation between the two countries. And we would like to see it stop. A lot of people were just killed, and we want to see it stopped. We're very much involved in that, yes, if that's what you're referring
People in
to.
India are seeking right to self-defense.
No, India is looking at something very strong. And I mean, India just lost almost 50 people and with an attack. So I can understand that also. But we're talking, and a lot of people are talking, but it is a very, very delicate balance going on. Right now, there's a lot of problems between India and Pakistan because of what just happened. In Kashmir. Are you talking about Kashmir? Yeah. In Kashmir, it's very dangerous. Yes, please.
Mr. President,
Wait.
On Huawei, sir, just one quick follow-up. Are you planning an executive order on Huawei?
Well, we're not doing anything right now. We may or may not put that in the trade agreement. We may be discussing it, but we'd only do that in conjunction with the Attorney General of the United States, because that is a matter that is outside of what we're doing. So we do that with the Attorney General if we do anything, and I guess there's a question as to whether or not that's being included in the agreement. Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. President, we haven't gotten your response yet to Amazon pulling out of New York City, your home city, your
I think
home
it's a
state.
big loss for New York City. I think it's a big loss. I think it's, if you look at the deal was not a great deal from the standpoint of they could have made a better deal than that, a much better deal. But still, I think it's a loss for New York City. And the $3 billion wasn't a check. It was a form of taxes over a period of time that now they'll never see, because, you know, they were going to take in a lot of jobs. They were going to take in a lot of taxes. So I think it's a big loss for New York City. It's the kind of thinking that our country's going to on the left, on the radical left, but ultimately it's not good for jobs and it's not good for the economy. But I think it was a big loss for New York City. I come from New York City. I love New York City. I think it was a big loss for New York City. Yes, sir.
Mr. President, when were you briefed, sir, on the Coast Guard member who was arrested for threatening Democrats and other members of the
I'm
media?
actually getting a very final briefing and a very complete briefing in about 2 hours
And do you
after
have any
this.
thoughts on this man
I think
who
it's a
went
shame.
after members of the
Yeah, I think it's a very sad thing when a thing like that happens, and I've expressed that, but I'm actually getting a very complete briefing in about 2 hours.
Do you think that you bear any responsibility for moderating your language when it comes to that?
No, I don't. I think my language is very nice.
Mr. President, on night
Mr. President,
yes.
From People's Daily
From China. From China.
Trade conflict have been 1 year, now negotiations going on. So what do you think?
Who are you with in China?
People's Daily China newspaper.
People's Daily?
Yeah. Okay. And then what do you think? The cooperation is still the good solution between?
Great cooperation.
Yeah.
We have great cooperation both ways. with China, and a lot of good things are happening. I mean, I think you see that. So many people every day, they are going to make a deal, they aren't going to make a deal, they don't know, they have no idea. It's fake news, you know, it's one of those things. Do they have fake news in China? I think so. But it's a question, are they going to make a deal? Aren't they? I think we have a very good chance of making a deal. But both parties want to make it a meaningful deal. We don't want to make a deal that doesn't. I can speak for the Vice Premier, I can speak for President Xi, I can speak for myself. Both parties want to make this a real deal. We want to make it a meaningful deal, not a deal that's done and doesn't mean anything. We want to make this a deal that's going to last for many, many years, and a deal that's going to be good for both countries. But we want to make it meaningful. Now, with that being said, China has the advantage of having many years of tremendous success at the expense of the United States. So they understand that. And I never blamed China for that. I blamed our past leaders. Our leaders have done a lousy job with trade. Our country lost $800 billion last year with trade generally. $800 billion. So the Vice Premier understands that. So this same agreement should have been made 20 years ago, not now. Because for 20 years, the United States has been really taken advantage of. And I'm not blaming China. We should have done the same thing to them. But we didn't do that. We had presidents that didn't do their job. You want to know the truth? We had presidents that did not do their job. Yeah, go ahead.
Will the MOUs be a long-term deal? How long would your MOU stay?
I think the MOU is going to be very short-term. No, we expect to go into... I don't like MOUs because they don't mean anything. To me, they don't mean anything. I think you're better off just going into a document. I was never a fan of an MOU.
So an MOU is a contract. It's the way trade agreements are generally used. People refer to it like it's a term sheet. It's not a term sheet. It's an actual contract between the two parties.
Yes.
A memorandum of understanding is a binding agreement between two people. And that's what we're talking about. It's detailed. It covers everything in great detail. It's just called a memorandum of understanding. It's a legal term. It's a contract.
And would you think that that would be a very long-term deal, sir?
Yes, I think so. Yes.
Contracts last while they last. There's no term. They last while they last.
Mr. President, on North Korea...
By the way, I disagree. I think that a memorandum of understanding is not a contract to the extent that we want. We're doing a memorandum of understanding that will be put into a final contract, I assume. But to me, the final contract is really the thing, Bob, and I think you mean that too, is really the thing that means something. A memorandum of understanding is exactly that. It's a memorandum of what our understanding is. But to me, the contract is, the real question is, Bob, so we do a memorandum of understanding, which frankly, you could do or not do. I don't care if you do it or not. To me, it doesn't mean very much. But if you do a memorandum, how long will it take to put that into a final binding contract?
What? From now on, we're not using the word memorandum of understanding anymore. We're going to use the term trade agreement, all right?
Okay.
Right.
No more. We'll never use the term agreement. We'll have the same document. It's going to be called a trade agreement. We're never going to use MOU again.
Are they going to put that into another agreement?
What we'll have will be a trade agreement that if we have major hurdles. I don't want to put the cart in front of the horse. Assuming you decide on an agreement, it'll be signed by the two people. It'll be a trade agreement between the United States and China. We're not going to use it.
I like that much better. I like that term much better.
Do you agree with that?
Agree.
Yes.
I wouldn't go into a memorandum. I would go right into a trade agreement. Either you're going to make a deal or you're not. To have these other agreements doesn't mean anything.
That word again.
Because they're not that meaningful, in my opinion. But anyway, I like that much better.
Mr. President, what do you think needs to be done after your meeting with Lynn Patton on NYCHA?
Is that right?
On what?
You had a meeting with Lynn Patton on the New York City Housing Authority?
Lynn Patton is great. And I can tell you the New York City Housing Authority, the mayor of New York, has done a terrible job with public housing. We're trying to help them, but the mayor of the city of New York has done a terrible job with respect to public housing. We're getting reports back, and it's a disgrace how badly New York City handles its public housing.
And he's heading to Iowa, Bill de Blasio.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts on Bill de Blasio heading to Iowa?
Well, I think he has to learn how to run New York City before he starts running the country, because he hasn't done a very good job.
On North Korea,
including, by the way, with Amazon.
On North Korea, your own administration officials say that Kim Jong-un has not actually decided yet whether he wants to denuclearize. So how can you meet with him if he doesn't even want to get the goal?
We have had such a great relationship, and China has helped us a lot with North Korea, with Kim Jong-un since I got to office. If I were not elected president, you would have been in a war with North Korea. We now have a situation where the relationships are good. where there's been no nuclear testing, no missiles, no rockets. We got our hostages back. We have many of the remains back and coming back rapidly, the remains of our great warriors from many, many years ago, and the families are so thrilled and so happy. We've had a great relationship. The Singapore was a tremendous success. Only the fake news likes to portray it otherwise. We would have literally been in a war with North Korea, in my opinion, had I not been elected. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. We'll see how it goes. I think it'll be successful. You have to speak up.
I'm trying. Steve King should run again for Congress. He said he won.
You know, I don't know anything about the situation. When did he announce that?
So today, he said he won.
I have not seen it. He hasn't told me anything, so we'll have to take a look.
You still in touch with him?
I haven't spoken to him in a long time now. I haven't spoken. I have not been involved in that. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.